Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petralis, and it's great to be back doing what I love most, and that's doing this podcast and interviewing coaches, and sometimes now interviewing players as well with their coaches. So it's great that our winter sports coverage has been phenomenal. It's been hard to balance it all, but as we're slowing down to get back into podcasting and really talking to coaches in depth about their programs and who they are is my true passion. So I'm glad we're back at it. We had an awesome winter season. We covered a lot of schools, and it was a really busy time, but it was awesome. And we got to meet a lot of great kids and a lot of great coaches. And along the way of doing that, one school that we covered was Medford High School. And ladies and gentlemen, actually, he's the head lacrosse coach at Medford High School, but also an assistant basketball coach at the varsity level there as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthony Sotora.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, man. So, I got to see this guy in action, and, we loved him, and we wanted to get him on this podcast because I think his story is awesome and what he does is great. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So really quick before we jump into it, I just want to give a little love and a little shout out. You guys see the Gold Athletics hat on here. So, I want to give some love to our partners over at Gold Athletics. These guys will raise the bar on your next team fundraiser. Your team profits can grow exponentially with their viral sales techniques, and their superior products can ship straight to the supporter's home. Any of their fundraisers can run 100% remotely, even their new digital gold card and a detailed tracking system that makes the sales and supporters easy to view. Ready to start making some money for your program? Check out Gold Athletics at www.goldathletics.com or at Gold Athletics on any social media platform. We deal with Matt Rossi, the National Director of Sales, and he's a phenomenal guy. He's a big fan of this podcast, has been a huge support to us. And, we love those guys over there, and we love to continue to work with them as we grow and they grow. It's been fun doing that together. So I just wanted to give some love to them before we jumped in. But now I want to jump into our guy, Anthony, here. And I mentioned to you guys before that, we caught him at Medford High School when we were covering the boys basketball team there. And one thing that I absolutely love is when you have somebody who coaches somewhere, but also play there and also as an athlete there. And I think that that's, a side of coaching that I love covering, because you have a passion to go back to the spot that you love and that you fell in love with those sports. So I'm just going to ask you, as an athlete of Medford High School, maybe a little bit of the sports that you played and just maybe the love and passion that you had for it, that you knew, hey, I want to come back here and coach someday.
Yeah, definitely. So in the fall, I played 3 years of football, my freshman, sophomore, junior year. Last year, my senior year, we did cross country in the fall. And then 4 years of basketball in the winter, 4 years of lacrosse in the spring. So I kind of was a little busy every season there.
Yeah.
And they always said, like, bleed blue, you have to play where you're from. And I fully believe that. And the best way to kind of take the next step and to actually, believe in that is to go back and help out as much as you can and do whatever you can do to make all those programs kind of grow.
Yeah. And so obviously you were an athlete of all seasons and played a lot of different sports. But when you came back, I know that, and I think I have my information correct, that when you came back, you jumped into coaching basketball and jumped into coaching lacrosse immediately. So you were kind of back at coaching both of those programs right out the gate. Is that correct?
I came back and I was doing the youth travel while I was still in college, and that ended up quickly becoming a high school gig. I was the JV coach when I met John Skerry. And then by the end of that year, I think my formal interview for lacrosse was actually on the sideline of a basketball game during pregame with the AD. But he was like, "We need a lacrosse coach." And I was like, "I'm still playing, but I can do it. I'll fit it into my schedule." I couldn't really turn the gig down.
So you were in college playing yourself while also coaching?
Yes, I was.
And then obviously balancing an academic need as well. I mean, that's pretty crazy. So actually, let me ask you about that. How the hell did you do that?
It was a lot of back and forth. Our practices that year for lacrosse in my college while I was playing were in the morning. So I'd go there in the morning. We'd practice for about 4 hours. I'd jump back on 93, head up. We'd have practice up here at 4 o'clock. And then I'd jump back, going back down 93 South. And my classes were all at night. So it was like 6 to 9:30 every night that I was at the at school. So it was very chaotic.
I mean, that's incredible. I didn't know that. Doing my homework on you, I didn't realize that. I mean, I think that's we're gonna jump into lacrosse in a little bit with you because I want to obviously you're the head coach there, and I want to jump in depth. I just wanted to talk a little bit about hoop first, being there, coming back, so on and so forth. I mean, you mentioned a guy like Coach Scary. So being a head coach of your own program, the lacrosse program at that school, what's it like to kind of actually be an assistant coach under somebody else, and maybe what you learn as an assistant coach that then helps you being a head coach in that next season?
Yeah, definitely. So John Scary, he's very, very invested, and he's more invested than I would have thought. Going in as a head coach, he's making sure that all these kids, their academics are well. That's the first thing. Home lives are well. Social lives are well. He's in on every single player, knowing exactly what they're doing, exactly what their headspace is like. Also, in terms of just the actual on the court stuff, he lets his assistants coach, which I know some head coaches aren't comfortable of doing, giving up the reins
It's
anywhere and
hard. It's
they
hard.
have control, right? But when I say something to him, like if we've built some trust now that he kind of lets me go ahead and take a little bit of the role. If anything happens on the defensive side, he looks at me and he's like, what do we want to do? And we have these conversations mid-game where, some head coaches don't. They have a game plan, they're going with it until the end of the end whistle.
Yeah. And it's hard as a head coach balancing that. I was an assistant coach for such a long time. So when I became a head guy, like you said, like letting your assistants coach, knowing if they put in the work and they do what they're supposed to do, then yeah, you got to give them the opportunity to kind of then spread that knowledge and let them kind of do their thing because they are putting the work in. So that is cool when head coaches do allow that. It's not easy. It's not easy for a head coach. I'm sure, as you know, being a head coach, the other way around a little bit. So learning from a guy like that, and obviously, kind of ingraining yourself in the athletics program, jump into lacrosse a little bit, just because that really kind of like, I didn't realize that. Now, like I have a lot more I want to ask you about that. So how did you then, as a young kid, I know your first year you guys went 6-14. So obviously taking over a program is difficult in itself, but obviously balancing what you were balancing. How did you go about then maybe assessing like coaching staff? Like, how did you say, okay, how am I going to do this? And what type of people do I need to surround myself a little bit with?
So the first like 2 years that I had the gig, that I had with the head coach, I had another teammate of mine playing at UMass Boston. He also was a Medford guy. When he found out that I was kind of in line for the head coaching role, he was jumping right on my back and he was like, let's do this together. You take the offense, I take the defense, we'll collaborate in the middle. So we were both kind of carpooling back and forth. He had morning classes, so we'd get to practice a little late. So we made it work. But the best part about it was everything that we were preaching, we also had to prove and do ourselves. So the kids were, how kids are. They're looking on YouTube, they're looking up our games, and they're calling out our missed ground balls, our turnovers, us getting beat on defense. So we really had to put in an extra step physically and prove that what we were saying was right and go and perform it in our own season and not just kind of say, yep, this is the right thing to do. You guys got to do it.
Right. So let me ask you this. And if you're being coached, like let's say your coach is obviously riding you for X, Y, and Z, or whatever you're not doing in practice or what you should be doing in a game, how do you then like assess film yourself as a young person? And I think the hardest thing is like you might know what you want to say and you might know what you want to do, but then being able to relate that information. So you as a player at the college level, did you find that hard, easy to be able to relate that information?
It actually made me a better player because I'm saying my coach is obviously telling me things and I think that I know everything. I'm a college athlete. I think that I'm good. And my coach is telling me things, I kind of brush it off. And then I go try to translate it to the high school kids and they're, doing the same thing I'm doing. They're brushing off. And I'm like, no, this is actually really important. You guys have to listen. You guys have to do this. It's all about like footwork. It's all about technique. And then I was like, well, they have to do it, then what if I just do it? It made me better. That first year coaching, it's actually my first year being an all conference player. And my coach was like, it was instantaneous. It clicked with you right when you started coaching. You kind of had like you were a coach on the field when I was playing, and I was making sure that everything was going right. I was over talking on the field. I was kind of thinking like my coach was thinking. like, what if they do this? Why don't we just do this? This might be a little better here and safer. And then my kids kind of would watch our film like, hey, coach, you told me to do this, but you did it this way. And we would actually have conversations back and forth about, well, I did it this way because of this over here. And we're talking about the college offenses. So they were picking up way quicker, I think, than they normally would. And I wouldn't even been able to teach them without actually been playing.
Did the local pay, like, that's impressive that you were also all conference. Did anyone ever talk about that? Did people know that?
No one knew that I was playing and coaching. We won the GBL that year. I was an all conference player, but it went completely under the rug. And I
I
was just
mean,
like,
that is, you know what? Shame on the Medford transcript right here. Shame on the Medford transcript right there. I'm gonna plant that story in there. I mean, they had no problem right about me messing up in the inauguration, but they'll talk about you being like an all-world person. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's highly impressive, and I mean that. And that's me just getting this information for the first time. I mean, that's unbelievable, and running, a program, and, you obviously are putting the work in, and you work in the Medford public school system. So, you're invested, man. I mean, that's crazy. I'm sending that clip to like a lot of people. I'm not even playing around.
yep. I was trying to look up the record of the youngest coach to win his league. I don't know what it is, but I think
It's you, dude, because no one's coached in
2012.
college and want to. It's you. We don't have to look up a record book.
Yeah,
There's no way in hell. There's
I
no
was
one
going to say
else.
it myself, but I didn't want to be that cocky.
But that's crazy, and I think that also is what's amazing about it, is that sometimes it is hard to see that stuff as a player when you're being coached, but then, like you said, being able to then translate that information, it's not the easiest thing to do to a young kid, but at least you're living proof of what it is that you were doing at the time too. So I think that's really cool, man. That's wow, that's awesome. So let's talk about your coaching tenure there, because you're jumping into your seventh season, I think. And your first 2 years, 6 and 14, kind of under that 500, but that's typical of any program that you're taking over. And obviously, with you and the circumstances that you had for at least that first year, then coming into it, you always say when you take over a program, your freshmen and sophomores are somewhat kind of like your measuring stick. Like, what have you done with your program for those years? So, those are your first two couple seasons. And then obviously you went from GBL to being NEC, and NEC is no joke. 2018, you went 15-3, you won the NEC. In 2019, 12-6, you were the NEC South Sportsmanship Team of the Year. 2020, obviously COVID took over the world. And then 2021, you went 7-0, undefeated in the GBL. You guys have never lost a game in the GBL. So that's a cumulative record of 34-9. I mean, talk about some dominance there in your program. What have you seen the growth? I mean, obviously having a couple years that you didn't do as well record-wise, but you were building something. What do you attest the growth to that your program kind of just took off?
Yeah, we actually had a conversation with a couple of the guys on the team last year, and they were like, the GBL really went down. I was like, no, the GBL kind of stayed put. We just got better. And it was you guys that are getting better. And I think I like to put it all on the leaders, the older guys. I put a lot of pressure on them. I was like, we're only going to get better with the amount of time that you guys want to put into this. We don't really have too many lacrosse guys. We get the football guys, we get the hockey guys. We're getting more and more every year. But I was like, if you want to be good at lacrosse, you need to put effort in at lacrosse. We can't just come in from hockey season and pick up our sticks and expect to win games. We need to do that in the off season. You guys need to get together. You guys need to have your sticks in your hands, and you guys put in that extra work. Then we don't have to do that for the first couple of weeks. We don't have to knock off the rust.
Right.
We can start working on higher level things rather than just being able to catch and throw the ball. And it's that little work that they put in that goes a long way. And then that goes the next year, they're putting in more work. And the next year, they're putting in more work. And now I get guys texting me all year saying, well, coach, we need field time. Can we get in the gym? And I'm like, yeah, let me do that. Let's see what we can get.
Yeah. And I think that that's so important of what you said. I mean, when I was like an assistant coach, especially when I was a coordinator, I got to coach those guys for 3 or 4 years. Like, I started with them at the freshman level and grew with them. And that freshman year, we committed to run what varsity was running terminology wise, even if we didn't have necessarily the right personnel for it. it was all about terminology. It was all about them when they made that growth as a sophomore, because a lot of people are like, oh, sophomore year. And it's a year that gets kind of brushed under the rug, but it's also an important growth year. You're going to find out, maybe some kids that you potentially could help you out in some sort of way, or maybe you have a stud who's a sophomore, or the opposite, like guys that kind of get buried a little bit as a sophomore, or that you kind of forget about because you're so focused on other things. So to see that growth in your program, it's really important, because obviously it pays off as time goes on, that stuff is sticking. And these younger guys that are now your upperclassmen are starting to play well, be successful, and then buying into it even more. So I find that just like really impressive about you now, adding on to the beginning part of that, of when you took the program over and the circumstances that you were under. I mean, that's unbelievable. So tip of the cap to you, man. That's cool.
And
That's real
and
cool.
a lot of the guys, I always said that I would never be one of those coaches that is gonna like yell at my guys and tell them it's my way or the highway. I really like to entitle a lot of the players to question me on what I know, and we can have a conversation on that. Maybe some I'm not always right. I like to think that I'm more right than a 14-year-old.
Right.
But if he's thinking one way and I'm thinking a different way, I think it's my job to show him, hey, you might be right half, but I'm right full. Like if you can think the way that I think, you might be able to have a better output. It might score more goals or might stop your guy a little bit more. And if we can collaborate together with both of our views, then we're going to get a better output just by two brains.
Yeah, and I think again that's just real impressive, and obviously someone who really understands who their program is or what they want their program's identity to be. So again, really impressive. And then again, just jumping into it, like I mentioned, you were undefeated in the GBL, most wins in a season. So these are school records here. Most wins in a season, 16. First program state tournament win in 2018. First second round tournament appearance in 2018 and 2021, and then in 2021 you had a first round bye in the state tournament. So obviously there's growth there every year. You're making the state tournament, you're winning a tournament game, you're going and getting a bye in a tournament. So obviously that's showing program growth and showing the type of talent that you have. One thing I love to ask about lacrosse, because I feel like lacrosse and football, it's somewhat similar as far as sports go at the youth level. I mean, football, I feel like at the youth level, it's more turning into flag football, and lacrosse is obviously a game that can be, it can be violent. You hit with a stick and you're real aggressive. So obviously at a youth level, there's probably safer ways that it's being played or being taught, and so on and so forth. But do you feel as a program, like I know in football, sometimes I was like getting kids in the school to like play football, like, oh, you never played before, like come play, like you're big or you're fast or you're athletic, like we can teach you how to do this and this. Do you do that, like actively recruiting basketball or in the school getting athletes?
Yeah, so I'd say in terms of like a youth standpoint, we probably get anywhere from 2 to 8 guys coming up from youth that are going to play. Everything besides that is all guys just trying it out their first. The sooner we can get them in the door, the better they're obviously going to be. We do get a handful of football guys that play their senior year. So it's really just like a melting pot of talent, skill, age, physicalness. Like you don't know what you're going to get, and we kind of have to pivot every year of like how we're gonna coach, because obviously we might have a 14-year-old that is our best scorer. He's been playing forever, but we might have an 18-year-old that played football before. This is his first year picking up a stick. He doesn't know the rules. So we're teaching two different things at two different ages. But the best thing is seeing them all come together. You'd think that with those two different layers there's going to be some controversy, but we haven't had that yet, cross my fingers, and everyone's been super grateful for it, because obviously the 14-year-old that's playing lacrosse, he knows that there's not too many other lacrosse guys, so the more people that are coming in, he's great for that. And the 18-year-old who's kind of struggling, that can't really catch a throw, doesn't want to really be made fun of, we never do that. All of our guys are super grateful that they're coming out, being a part of the team, and they mesh together so well. I walk around the school and there's these starting football corners talking to like these freshmen about the game next week, and it's just kind of nice to see like all those parties come together as one and come to practice and want to do good and want each other to do well too.
Do you feel like you're like the success of the program, because spring sports is different than winter and fall sports in the sense that most of them are played in a rink or a stadium or a gym, where yours is kind of played out in the wide open. So when it's nice weather, of course people want to be out there, and when it's freezing cold weather, no one wants to be out there, or rainy weather or whatever. Do you feel like the success that you've had, you're noticing more of a draw to your games or more of a notice in the school? Or do you feel like you kind of still have a lot to maybe get in that area as far as like a spring sport goes?
There's definitely more of a draw the last couple of years. That 16 and 3 year, um, we only had 15 guys on the entire program. So we had guys who were starting at attack. If we got a penalty, they were going down to play defense. There was 3 freshmen on the team. So that was a bunch of leaders just going out there digging in for wins every time they could.
Yeah.
We had goalies running the ball up and down the floor, up and down the field. So after that, I think last year we had up to 45 guys in the program.
Wow.
So it was a really quick turnaround. They saw the success. Springtime, all the kids that aren't playing lacrosse, they want to come and watch because it's right out back, right outside the school. It's nice
Right.
weather. They can hang out. And some of them were like, oh, that looks like fun. Why don't I do that? So the numbers were going up, which is awesome. We were able to get a sub varsity team back. So the success keeps going. The football guys, they've obviously play in the rain, the snow, they play in the bad weather. So this
Yeah.
is like really refreshing for them. They get to hit people with helmets on with a metal stick, and it's
Right. Right.
70, 80 degrees outside. So they're happy to be there. And they had a dynamic that, a lot of lacrosse players don't necessarily have, that kind of hard-nosed family. We're in this together football mentality. And it's snowing outside. Yeah, we're going outside. It's raining outside. Yeah, we're going to play in the rain. And some of
Yeah.
these lacrosse guys or hockey guys, they have to kind of buck up, and they get a little more tough, and we kind of go with them.
Yeah, and that's so important because I feel like in football, like that is important. Like you might have a team who in the summertime or in the warm weather time is one type of team, and then when it gets cold and gritty and the game turns more into like 22 guys in the line of scrimmage, and you got to pound the rock. Like you kind of find out who your identity is a little bit and how tough your team is. So I'm sure in lacrosse, especially early on, like late March, early April, the weather's still not great outside. So you're out there even if it's 30 degrees, and yep, the kids love it to a point, but when you get mid-season and the season's getting tough and you're beat up a little bit and you're bruised up a little bit, going out in those cold weather is not it's not easy either. So yeah, I totally agree with you in that sense. Getting some football guys on there that kind of face those elements consistently, I think helps maybe with your identity or the toughness of your team. Um, when I take a look at like off-season programs, I mean, I just don't know about lacrosse in general. As a head coach, are you encouraging your kids to like continue to be athletes in the sense of play different sports? Is there clinics or camps, or do you want them playing lacrosse outside of your program? I mean, how do you kind of look at your off-season conditioning program as far as what the expectations are for your kids?
So I will never tell a kid not to play another sport. I think the more sport the kid can play is the more they're going to grow and be better. There's obviously elements from every sport that you can kind of take, carry over, and bring to your other sport. Just like we were talking about the football, that toughness, that translates directly into lacrosse.
Yeah.
If you're a basketball guy, you can kind of get defensive schemes much easier on lacrosse field. They're pretty close. But if they're focused on lacrosse, they come up to me and say, hey, coach, I really love this sport. What can I do to get better? My answer is obviously going to be, well, you have to play more. Let's look at these select teams. Let's see what we're doing in the summer. If you're playing other sports, let's try to find a team that's not going to conflict with your other sports as much. Really, as much as they can get out there and play sports, whether they're playing 2 in the summer, 2 in the fall, they're doing a select team, they're going to camps. I try to give all the information that I can find out there. Whatever they want to do, that's great. As long as they're doing something. I don't want a kid just playing lacrosse, coming in March, leaving in June, and then that's it for the whole year. That's not going to help anyone.
Yeah, and I like what you said about taking different elements from different things, and I think that that's like a key to a complete athlete. Sometimes is that once in a while you have those kids that are just like gifted and talented, and you're lucky to have them. But part of that gifted and talented is not too many kids are just playing that sport year round. I mean, kids do it, but there's just something to be said that what I've seen in my personal experience of a kid who plays multiple sports, but really in the off season just focuses on one sport. I think it's interesting to see how they are when they play those other sports, and maybe some of the elements that they're missing that you're like, well, they would get this if they played this type of sport or would just put in this type of situation and so on and so forth. So I agree. And part of any program and growing it is obviously you mentioned your league play, you're undefeated in the GBL, you play in the NEC, which wasn't easy. But as a coach, how do you value your non-league games? I know like the state playoff system's changing, and has changed several times. And so everything's a little bit different now. But how do you go about like assessing opponents to play in that non-league schedule to maybe help your team in that league schedule play when you get there?
Yeah, I think it's important to play kind of different styles of teams. Where we're playing Lowell's or Woburns, we might want to throw in a South Shore team to see what they're doing down there. Maybe it's a little different, or kind of hit different leagues, just so we're not, seeing the same things over and over again. Because as a coach, you're playing against another coach. They might do something that you like, you steal it. Now the whole league's doing it. So I think the more I can get to different leagues, the more stuff I'm gonna see, and it's better for the kids not to I like to obviously scout the games, but I want them to going into the game and prepare for that game like it's the championship, no matter who we're playing. So if they don't know about a team, that's great. Let's play the South Shore team, and they're walking in thinking they're walking into a championship game, no matter what their skill level is on the other side.
Yeah. And I think it's always cool to see other teams too, especially when, I mean, as a coach, there's some years that you're just down and that, you're probably not going to win the league, or you got a couple teams that are just a lot better than you in the league. But it's also about kind of seeing what your team is when you kind of see other styles and kind of really understand and figuring out who your identity is based off of your personnel. So seeing how other teams just like get off the bus, or how other teams warm up, or how other teams like do their calisthenics, or just the energy that they come on the field with. I think sometimes when your team's lacking that, those are great coaching points or key points to be like, well, look at this team. They came ready to play. They were this, they were that. And it wakes your team up a little bit too. I mean, I used to coach with the guy in Serge Clivio that like our non-league schedule was loaded. Like some years we were just like, what's BC like not available this week? Like why, and we'd like play some monsters and we play tough and we lose a lot of them. But then we get in the league play, and for like a 3 or 4 year window, we were untouchable in the league. We were untouchable. So I understood it from one end of kind of playing those hot and heavier teams. But then on the other end, it's tough when you don't start your season off very well and you're banking on winning your last 6 or 7. But in lacrosse, it seems like you have a pretty good balance.
I think that's very important too, because a lot of the kids, especially the younger kids, they haven't seen how good a lacrosse player can really be.
Yeah.
So, and I want them to see that before the state tournament. A couple of years, especially with the freshmen, the sophomores, they get in there and they're like, "Wow, this dude just shot 100 miles per hour right off the crossbar. Like he's pinpointing it from 15 yards away," and they're just in shock. And right then and there, I'm like, "All right, well, half the team thinks we're going to lose now because they haven't seen an actual lacrosse player." So we can
Yeah.
mix in a couple of those during the season, getting into the first round, going into the second round. It's not going to be as shocking and as it would be.
Yeah, that like wake up moment, like welcome to varsity kid moment, when you see that. So yeah, I mean, I totally get that. And you're right. Like sometimes seeing what other talents out there and measure a measuring stick for you can in a way like change your practice style. It change the way kids looking at like a game plan, or how they really listen to their coaches a little bit more. So that stuff can be very beneficial too. But I always find it interesting how different teams and different sports and programs do it, because there isn't one formula. It really is kind of based off of who your style is and who you are as a coach, and how you look at your program. So I think that's great. So jumping in the season, obviously, and in a month and a half, you guys are going to be really out there kind of going at it, and you're going to be taking that basketball cap off and putting that lacrosse cap on. What's the 2022 squad look like this year?
We got a lot of upperclassmen this year, a lot of guys who this is probably my biggest class that came in as a freshman that kind of stayed all the way through. So I'm really excited for them. They kind of have these up and down high school careers where we didn't have that 2020 season when they were sophomores. We had played 7 games in regular season last year. So they went from being freshmen, 7 games, now they're seniors. So it's nuts. And I'm happy that they have a whole regular season now. but now it's like put up or shut up time. We've talked about how good you guys were and how much we're getting better, and obviously the success. Now it's all right. You guys are seniors now. Go carry the torch and go prove what we can do.
And that's great. And I mean, practice style wise, right? Like you got a team that, this is a team now that you've had, you got a good amount of guys. You feel like this could be a pretty successful run season, however you look at it and what your goals are. I mean, what's your practice style with this more of a veteran type team, knowing that the knowledge is there, but yet maybe the experience isn't because they have not had like a sophomore year and not really a true junior year either, if you look at it that way. So how are you looking like stylistically, practice wise, to really get this team going?
So, because they're all older, they're gonna kind of maybe push back a little bit more, but I'm gonna focus more on like technique. There's obviously things that we haven't went over yet. But they do listen very well. They're very coachable, but they're probably stuck in their ways a little bit with some of their technique and what they want to do. So probably a lot of technique stuff, split up the offense, flip the defense, really attack that, with a bunch of coaches going on the offense, going on the defensive side, then just competing. I feel like the more that we can compete, especially with a lot of upperclassmen that have been there for a little while, that the more we're going to get better. If our best offensive guys can go against our best defensive guys every single day, there's not going to be a lot that's going to surprise us when the games come.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And I think again, like the more you can prepare and the more that you can get them ready for any type of situational stuff they see, the better off you're going to be in the long run for sure. Um, Obviously you're an assistant basketball coach and that's how I met you. We talked a lot about your lacrosse, just incredible coaching career, in my opinion. Do you see yourself trying to become a head basketball coach and actually maybe balance being a head coach in more than one sport?
Yeah, I think it's going to be there for me eventually. Obviously, that's the goal, is to be a head coach. It's obviously not as easy as I would have thought of the 20-year-old. So I kind of focus more on the lacrosse side, from 20 to 27. And if a basketball opportunity comes up, if I'm able to do that, then yeah, definitely I'm going to step in and take over a head coaching role. That would be great. And I think now I'm a little older. I'm not playing anymore, so I think I would be able to balance the two.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I had a hard time balancing the one with football. And what I found being a coordinator for so long, when you're the number two, man, like number two is like you get to coach, like you get to coach and just worry about what it is that the team needs to do and perform on the court. And obviously you're involved off the court with them too, but your main focus is like, okay, I am making sure that these kids are ready for whatever it is. And then when you're the head coach, it's the same thing, but then you're dealing with grades and you're dealing with behavior in school and you're dealing with stuff outside of school and then you're dealing with parents and playing time and fundraising and you keep going and going and going. Like you kind of lose a little bit that like that being able to really just focus on the product and what the game is, because you are trying to balance that other stuff. So yeah, doing two, I would love to see that. I think you're very capable of doing it if you were able to balance college and playing and coaching all at the same time. I think it'd probably be a piece of cake to you, truthfully. So that's awesome, man. And then I guess, my question to you is, because I don't want to sound like an old man, right? Like when we were younger, we listened to people like, oh, when I played high school sports, blah, 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 blah. I know that high school athletes have changed since I've played, and I'm 38 years old, so I played 20, let's call it 25 years ago. So I mean, that's it's crazy when you think about it. When I think about that, but you're a lot bit of a younger guy, and I would say you played within the last 10 years, right? So let's call it that. Have you noticed athletes change, and if so, what direction? I'm not necessarily saying in a bad way. I just mean, what's the biggest thing you might have noticed in the change of today's athlete versus even when you played?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a change. Just nowadays they tend to question a little bit more. It's not just, oh, well, coach said this, I have to go and do it. It's, well, you need to give me a reason why I have to do it, which I love. I think it's great that kids are more engaged, but I know some coaches don't. And there are some times where the kids might question you at the wrong time. Like fourth quarter in a game, probably not the best time to question your coach. It's probably not going to go over well.
Yeah.
And they need it to be said to them a little more politely nowadays than it was 10 years ago. And then the whole playing time thing, people getting involved. I know if I was ever on the bench for 4 games, I was not saying anything. I was going to go try and practice to try to get off the bench. Now it's, well, why am I not playing? what
Yeah.
can I do? And they kind of just need an answer all the time. Where just show up, try your hardest. And it's not for one day, not for 2 days. Just keep trying hard every single day. You'll eventually be noticed.
Yeah, and I think that that's so hard. I mean, I can say this because I'm not coaching or affiliated with any sports program, so I can go on a pedestal for this for a second. But in all honesty, I think you hit upon a point. When I coached, the one thing that I noticed changed from when I was assistant coach and took a few years off and then becoming a head coach was that all of a sudden, because you were older or an upperclassman, you should be playing, right? And it's like that's not how it works. Like if you're not in the weight room in the off season and you're not getting yourself better and you just think, oh, because it's senior year, it's my turn. Yeah, you shouldn't be playing. And I think that that's just cause if you're not putting the work in and somebody grinds hard and works hard or is just getting better being the number two and then eventually starts splitting reps with you or getting more time or whatever sport it is. I think, hey, listen, that's the sense of competition. Sports prepares you for real life. Sports prepares you for the job force and how to interview and how to present yourself and how to carry yourself. And that's what you do when you represent a program. So when you get a job, you're obviously representing the company or the school or the city or whatever it is that you do. So I just think it's really important sometimes that those are the lessons that sometimes I wish. Yeah, I think parents sometimes like their kids question something, they're very easy to believe them. But I think the true life lessons are kind of making them think, well, why aren't you playing? Why aren't you getting the time you want? What is it that we maybe need to do a little bit more of? And a lot of times just practicing. Going into shooting like baskets for 20 minutes isn't practicing on your own. That's just going out there and having fun to say that you were going around and shooting baskets, but putting in the work and running hard when nobody's there. And yeah, maybe going to the court for an hour but you're like, you have cones out and you're shooting free throws, you're shooting threes from the same spot, you're bouncing off the dribble and like, taking a shot. Like that's the stuff that in basketball, like in football, it's the same thing. Conditioning, working out, going to camps, being with your team. Like those are the important things. So sorry, I went on my pedestal there because I agree with you. I agree that that is just such a change in sports. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because, like you said, sometimes there's coaches out there that don't maybe care as much or they're not as invested into it, whether they just been doing it for a long time and they're exhausted, or yeah, it gets to a point that maybe it's hard to balance and all because being a head coach is not easy. It is not easy. So I give any person who does it love, but it's just sometimes to make sure that you're always there for the right reason. And if you're not, then obviously that's a decision you got to make. Right. So, yeah, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox for that.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
I got to match, as much as they're doing, that every day I'm coming into work just like they're coming into work. And if I'm telling them, yeah, you got to give it to me, you got to go as hard as every single day, empty the tank, I got to do the same thing, or else, I'm looked at as a hypocrite. If
Yeah,
I'm, if
no.
I'm not scouting every day, if I don't know something about another team, if I'm not in drills at practice, contesting shots, running around, I can't expect them to do it.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, especially when real life like kicks into all of this because you are so invested when you coach. You're so into it, whether it's watching the film or driving to, and against traffic to go see a team that you potentially could see in the playoffs or a team that you just need to go see because you're going to see them later on in the year. Like it's not easy. It's time consuming. And that then jumps into your real life. I mean, when I coach football, like it was my life, really was. And sometimes that's other people around you don't understand that as much of how invested and how much you care about it. So it's hard balancing that all, So sometimes I just wish that people looked at the whole picture of a coach and not just kind of snapshots of a game that they're allowed to sit there and then drive home in the car and have all the comments they want to make because they have 40 minutes to think about it versus you having a split second to think about it. So, yeah, it's funny, but that's what makes coaching great. It's being able to balance that all and still be able at the end of the day to be happy and put a good product out there. You have a great story and it obviously at the beginning of it added a lot to it. What is your advice to young coaches, those kids that are looking to get into the coaching world, whether it's just jumping in and sinking their teeth in there for the first time, or a young coach like yourself that then maybe wants to make that leap to become a head coach? What would be your advice to those young coaches out there?
I would say the first thing is you're not going to win the state championship year one. Get a couple small things that you can really just build a foundation on. If that's just sprinting on every play, all right, if we're just going to do nothing today, we're going to drop every ball, we're not going to score it all, we're going to let guys go by us. As long as we're sprinting every day, we can build on that. Take the small steps every single day. And by the time you're in your second year, your third year, those small steps are going to just be givens, and those are the givens that you want. You want your kids just go to practice every day and give you all the effort. As a coach, you can teach the skill stuff, you can teach the game planning stuff, you can teach the IQ stuff, but you really need to just get everything out of your players first. And once that becomes a given, everything else is just gravy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and you're so right. I think you hit upon a lot of good points there. Into just realizing like coaching's about figuring yourself out a little bit, right? Like I learned very quickly, like yourself, I wasn't a huge yeller screamer early on because I felt like I had a lot to learn. And then I show my players love, but then when I'm hard on them, I'm hard on them. And then maybe that's part of, being in education too. For me, is that like I kind of understand even in the classroom the balance of sympathy and empathy, but then also the balance of being like, no, this is what you need to do because you're being asked to do it. This is important. This is why I want you to do it. Like it correlates in the coaching. It's the same thing. Like when kids question you, it's like, because I watch film or I drove and saw this team and they do like being able to then give it back and being able to have that knowledge as like a young guy or a young coach. I think that shows the passion and the love that you have for it for sure. Um, the last question I have for you is just pretty simple. Like, being in Medford, and obviously now you're ingrained in education. Yeah, do you just see Medford as kind of the home for you? Like this is where you want to coach, this is where you want to be, or do you see yourself down the road really trying to take that next leap into your coaching career, whether that's coaching at a bigger high school or more prominent whatever program, or even maybe that D3, college level?
You know, I think I bleed blue. I think I'm stuck in. I don't do it for the fame, the clout, the money. I do it because I know I was that kid. In Medford, I know that sometimes you might not have a coach that's going to do it the right way or do it for the right reasons. And the only thing that I can do for all those kids is to be available and me do it for the right reasons for them. If I can't look at it as a kid and being like, oh, well, my lacrosse coach isn't here. I had three varsity lacrosse coaches in 4 years at the high school. Or one of my basketball coaches isn't giving me the attention that I need because I'm not as skilled, or I'm not playing AAU. So I look at it as like, well, I'm going to be there for those guys who want to play basketball, who love the sport, who might not be as skilled right now, but want to be in the gym every single day and get better and get to that point. Or that lacrosse player that's, well, I don't really have a coach. I want to learn. I want to be a part of this sport. I want to get to the next level. I want to be the guy that's like, all right, me and you, let's go. We're going to go practice. We're going to work on this. I'm going to tell you all the things you're doing wrong. I'm going to tell you all the things we're doing right. And hopefully we can get to that point where you're happy at the end of your athletic career. And you can look back and say, you know what, coach, I don't regret anything. I empty the tank every single time. I'm happy with what I did.
Yeah, and then getting those guys to come back and want to coach with you, like there's nothing like getting alumni back who like understand the program, like you said, bleed blue, right? And getting guys who buy into your program, into your system, and want to come back and coach. That's even more help in kind of spreading the message that you want to spread versus maybe having somebody who just is coming into the program who might be a very good coach, but is missing that maybe like once upon a time I was a part of this and I know there's just certain feels or vibes that I get when I'm here on this field coaching. And I mean, your facility is beautiful too. So even on top of it, like, yeah, you want to come back and coach. I mean, outside the facility's beautiful. Inside the gym's nice. And then, high school's old. So, but yeah, you guys have beautiful facilities up there in fields and, your AD's, top notch. I love them. So, it's definitely, a good spot to be. So before we end this podcast, we're going to jump into our Cheney's 2-minute drill. Our friends over at Cheney's on Friend Street, Joe and Rizzuti, those guys are unbelievable. So if you guys have never been down there after a Celtics game or Bruins game, go for it, man. Go get your arancinis, calzones, pizza. They're unreal. So a Cheney's 2-minute drill. So this is how it works. Okay. This is rapid fire questions I'm going to ask you, all pertaining to coaching or playing in your prospective sports, whether it's basketball or lacrosse. And I do get a challenge flag. If I want you to explain and answer a little bit more, I do get the challenge, and vice versa. If you want to explain the answer and why you said something, we're pretty lenient here. We'll let you do that. Okay. So let me set my timer up here, and here we go. Best teammate you've ever had at any level?
Jack Dillon in college, he was a D1 transfer. He was a game changer.
Wow. Okay. Song that still gets you kind of juiced up before a big game, coach, player, whatever.
Let the bodies hit the floor. We'll
What a
always
great choice. What a great choice. Hardest place to play in high school at a away hoops game. What place or gym did you just hate going to?
When I was a player, Billerica, my cousin was the best person on that team, and I knew everyone in the stands, and they were coming down on me. I was the number one victim.
I'll ask you the same question for lacrosse, but I'll ask you as a coach, what place do you just hate going to play?
Everett, that's behind a school. It's hard to get to. The field's smaller. It's, you just got to get accustomed to the environment there before we could play.
Okay. Okay. One word to describe your coaching style.
Persistent.
What would your players say?
It depends on what sport you're in.
I like that answer. We'll leave it at that. So in one word, because you and I are in the same boat here, one word to describe education this year.
I'd say engaged. I
Okay.
haven't come across a teacher and administrative staff that doesn't want to go the extra mile to get what the kid needs.
Yeah. Okay. I hear that. I hear that. If you had to pick one, basketball, lacrosse.
Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble. Lacrosse.
All right. And the last question I'll ask you, do you prefer Medford home jerseys or Medford away jerseys?
Home whites.
Home whites.
White. Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. You survived the Cheney's 2-minute drill. And again, we really appreciate you coming on here. In all honesty, like just listening to your story a little bit. I've been in Medford for 15 years as a teacher. And I worked hard. I didn't necessarily coach in Medford. I coached at Arlington Catholic, but being able to build yourself in a city that, you grew up in or where you're from, and just being able to rise and gain respect, for you to do what you did, especially at the age that you did it, and being able to take over a program within a few years, make them a pretty good program and win some championships and in a tough conference at that time at the NEC as well. It just kind of shows your character and growing in the city. And as I said to you at the beginning, I'm not messing around with that. I'm going to reach out and I'm going to get your story out there. I think that that's something that should be talked about, especially in the city. I think that that's a great story, and especially for young high school kids that you're coaching or that are in the school system, whether it's at the high school, middle school, elementary level, they should hear that, because I think that shows when schools try to show school pride, like you're kind of proof of, yeah, like I love this place. Like I'm back here now doing my thing. And I know there's other people there like Dave Richard or, like a Danny Kelly. Like I know those guys went to high school there and they're there and they're very involved and do their thing. So, it is really cool. And, best of luck to you as you grow in your career. And we love to cover you in the spring, man. We love to come to, like we did for hoops, to come cover you guys and get on the field and run around and do some lacrosse with you.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was a blast. Love being here. And yeah, definitely in the spring, we can definitely have you out there, go over a couple of games. I can show you what it's all about.
Yeah, well, I love being back here today. I love that you were kind of my kickoff into getting back into podcasting. Like I said, our winter season has just been crazy fun, but it's been busy. And now we're getting to sit behind the mic and get to really introduce, guys like you to the world. So I'm really excited. And I was honored to have you on here today. So from Beyond Podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, Anthony Tortora, Medford High School. Till next time, guys.